Jackson is at number 5, Justin Herbert at 6, Trevor Lawrence, Justin Fields is a guy that I totally neglected. It's a guy that we talked about for literally 30 minutes yesterday and just decided to throw to the wayside. I didn't mention him in the notes, but I feel like this is a guy that we have to talk about. Currently, I have Justin Fields as my top 5 fantasy quarterback in redraft. Jacob has him at number 10. And I'll make this short and sweet. As I mentioned before, and I'll say it 30 more times throughout this podcast, rushing is king for fantasy football. And boy, did Justin Fields do a lot of it in 2022. Led the league in rushing from the quarterback position, ran his way all the way up to a top 7 fantasy football finish, or top 8. Not to mention, you add DJ Moore, you add some pieces to increase that offensive line and that ability to protect him. Sure, we may not know what Justin Fields can do with a clean pocket, but if you look up Justin Fields clean pocket throws on YouTube, accuracy is not the problem here. It's that he was forced to run all those times last year, and he's still going to do a lot of it, which helps his fantasy value a ton. That's why I have him at 5. Sure, am I a little ambitious? I can't say I'm not, but I'd love to hear why you have him so low, Jacob, all the way at number 10. And again, consensus-wise, he is our number 8 fantasy quarterback.
Yeah, so look, I love Justin Fields. Don't get me wrong. And I think he's going to have a good NFL career. But we're talking about redraft rankings for this upcoming season, right? And I just don't think that the rushing alone is going to sustain, consistent fantasy success. Like, it definitely can't. Like, it can propel him very high. The thing is, it's kind of unfair because he's going to have 2 45-point games that are going to skyrocket him on the end of the year lists. The stat that I'm concerned about and why I have him so low is how many weeks is he actually going to win you? Is he actually going to win you 8 or more weeks? I don't think so. I think he's going to have those 2 or 3 blow-up games that pump up his stats at the end of the season and maybe put him in the top 5 because we're just calculating fantasy points total, right? But as I've kind of evolved as a fantasy player, I'm realizing that like a stat that's more important than end of year finish is impact on weekly wins or impact on weekly losses. So as a fantasy ranker, I have him at 10. Like, I don't think he's going to consistently get you 25 more than 25, 30-point games. I think he's going to have those 3 or 4 blow-up games that will bulk up his stats.
Well, his rushing upside certainly gave him some viable fantasy production. And yes, the big blow-up games are expected, and there may not be as many of them, but he was a pretty consistent quarterback on average. 20.5 fantasy points per game. That actually made him finish number 6 last year at the fantasy football position. And let's be honest, Geno Smith was also a top 5 fantasy quarterback last year. We have him in our rankings, but nowhere near there. So when you look at his average, it's up there. It's up there. It makes him a top 5 quarterback because remember,
but the blow up games add to the average. It's not about that. It's about like how it impacts your overall weekly score. Like, yeah. So it's hard to look. There's no stat to go back and look at, right? You would have to monitor it if you had him on your roster and throughout the whole season, right? So I guess you could look at his fantasy points per like each game and see how much he had, so it's kind of a difficult stat to discuss.
He had 7 games last year where he accrued more than 25 fantasy points. He missed 2 games.
But
so
are how many fantasy points are like you definitely won that week? Isn't there like 3 or 4 probably?
There's a couple. Yeah, there's 5 of them. I mean, he had a 42-point game, a 40-point game, and then there's some big averages out. There's some lackluster games.
So that's my
25,
only
25,
concern.
25.
Like
There's
he's
consistency there too.
capable of having that Lamar Jackson season actually he's not. As a rusher, yes. As a passer, no way. That's the thing. Lamar Jackson MVP year, the year he went crazy and was winning. He literally was, I think he was winning weeks every week in fantasy, right? He threw a ton of touchdowns that year. And I just don't see that for Justin Fields. Like, I know they have DJ Moore, but I got to see it as a passer. He has to improve as a passer for this to happen. And I don't think that's going to happen. Like, he'll improve, but not enough to become that Lamar Jackson year.
Well, I'm not saying he has to have a Lamar Jackson year because Lamar Jackson was the number 1 overall quarterback for fantasy that year. But I'm saying he could definitely be a top 5 quarterback for you.
Yeah.
I think we both make some good points, Jacob. So give us your thoughts down in the comments. What do you think about Justin Fields going into 2023? Can he crack the top 5, or is he on his way out? Let us know your thoughts, and as always, we appreciate